She shattered his heart on the most important day of his life. Now she's asking him to save hers. As Ethan stared at the divorce papers, his hands trembled. Not from fear, but from the storm of memories crashing down on him. Melissa wasn't just any client. She was the woman who vanished moments before their vows. And now, she was desperate, battling a ruthless husband trying to strip her of everything. The irony was brutal. Ethan had spent years rebuilding himself after she disappeared, and now she stood before him, broken and needing his help. Every instinct told him to walk away, but beneath the scars, a part of him still cared. Could he fight for the woman who once left him behind? Or would justice demand something more than forgiveness? Ethan was no longer the heartbroken groom. He was the one holding the gavel and her future. Ethan sat at his desk, the glow of the office light casting long shadows across the stack of court files in front of him. But no matter how hard he tried, his attention wouldn't stay on the words. His eyes kept returning to the top of the page, to the name that haunted him, Melissa Harris. The name alone felt like a punch to the gut, bringing back memories he had buried years ago. Now she was the defendant in a divorce case, one he had to preside over as judge. The irony wasn't lost on him. The case looked simple at first. Melissa was divorcing her husband of 2 years, Jack, citing irreconcilable differences. But Ethan knew better. Behind the formal language was a mess of emotions and broken dreams, much like their own story. And now he had to remain impartial as the ghosts of his past stood before him in court. He remembered when he and Melissa were inseparable. She was vibrant, passionate, and full of ambition, especially about her dream of starting her own fashion line. Ethan had loved that about her. He'd supported her, believed in her. But as his own legal career began to climb, something between them shifted. Melissa had grown distant, often returning home late, brushing off his questions with a forced smile. Friends noticed too, whispering that she seemed different. Ethan had tried to reach her, to fix what was breaking, but she always said everything was fine. Then came the day that changed everything, their wedding day. She never showed up. No explanation, no goodbye, just silence. Ethan had stood alone at the altar, surrounded by stunned guests, trying to understand how the woman he loved could disappear so completely. That day left a scar that never fully healed. Years passed, and Ethan drowned himself in work, building a reputation as a sharp, focused judge. He thought he'd moved on until Melissa reappeared in his courtroom. She looked older, composed, but her eyes held a different kind of pain. When their eyes met, there was a flicker of something, recognition, regret, maybe even fear, but it vanished behind her courtroom mask. As the trial progressed, Ethan listened as Melissa described her side of the marriage with Jack. She spoke of loneliness, neglect, and how her efforts to save the relationship went unnoticed. Her words echoed things Ethan had once refused to hear. And as her attorney painted Ethan as a cold, emotionally absent man, it hit him harder than he expected. Was that who he had been to her? One evening, drained and conflicted, Ethan received a call. Melissa was offering a settlement, but she wanted to meet him privately first. He hesitated. Seeing her again outside court felt dangerous, but something inside him needed closure, so he agreed. They met in a quiet cafe. She was already there, sitting alone. When their eyes met, the noise around them faded. For the first time in years, they weren't judge and defendant. They were just two people with a history too heavy to ignore. The cafe was quiet, too quiet, as Ethan stepped into the dimly lit space. The air hung heavy, thick with the kind of tension only two people with too much history can create. He had agreed to this meeting, though he wasn't sure why. Maybe it was the need for closure, or maybe deep down, he still held on to some small hope that the past could be untangled. Melissa was already there, seated at a corner table. She looked different, older, more composed, but the sadness in her eyes hadn't changed. Her dark brown hair was pulled into a neat ponytail, and her black dress was simple yet elegant. She hadn't noticed him yet, but he saw her instantly. He took a breath and walked over. Each step felt like dragging his entire past behind him. When he reached her, she looked up, her eyes flickering with something familiar, before a wall of composure slid into place. "Ethan," she said, her voice calm, but edged with something he couldn't quite place. "Thank you for coming." He nodded and sat across from her. Silence stretched out between them like a wire pulled taut. "You asked to meet," he said finally, his voice quiet. "So, what is it you need to say?" Melissa exhaled slowly, fingers tracing the rim of her glass. "I know the trial's been hard. I've been hard. But I didn't know any other way to face this." Ethan stiffened. That line again. "I don't know how else to do this." It was always her fallback when things got tough. "Don't do this," he said, his voice sharper now. "Don't act like what happened can just be talked through. You left me at the altar, Melissa. You tore everything apart. And now you want to talk about it like we're just tying up loose ends?" Melissa's face didn't flinch. She held his gaze. "I know I hurt you. I know what I did was awful. But do you really think I left because I didn't care?" He wanted to shout, to throw years of pain back at her. But he was tired. The rage had worn thin over time. "You left because you didn't love me enough to stay," he said, voice low. "You gave up." Tears shimmered in her eyes, but she blinked them away. "I felt like I was drowning, Ethan, like I was disappearing. I kept waiting for you to notice, but you were always somewhere else. You didn't see me." His heart pounded. The words pierced him, because deep down, some part of him knew she was right. He had buried himself in work, in ambitions, in everything but her. "I didn't know," he whispered. "I couldn't tell you," she replied. "Every time I tried, I felt like I was making it worse. I didn't want to leave. I just didn't know how to stay and still be me." For the first time, Ethan saw her not as the woman who had walked out on him, but as someone who had been breaking long before that day. And maybe he had never really noticed. Maybe he had been too focused on being the provider, the planner, the future builder, to actually be present. Silence returned, but this time it wasn't hostile. It was full of everything they couldn't say, everything they finally had. Ethan stood abruptly, the chair scraping behind him. He felt lightheaded. "I need time," he muttered. Melissa nodded. "I understand." He walked out into the cold night, his thoughts spinning. The truth wasn't simple. The pain wasn't one-sided. And for the first time, he wondered if healing didn't come from answers, but from finally understanding what had gone unsaid. Weeks passed, and Ethan slowly found his peace, not through forgetting, but through understanding. That emotional meeting with Melissa had left a mark, but it also opened a door he'd long kept shut. He learned that healing doesn't come from blaming or holding on to pain. It comes from facing it head-on, from understanding where things went wrong, and from forgiving both the other person and yourself. Their relationship was over, but that didn't mean it was meaningless. In fact, it had taught them both more about love, communication, and self-growth than anything else ever could. They didn't rekindle what was lost, but they found something more valuable: closure and mutual respect. Ethan carried that lesson into his work. As a judge, he became more empathetic, more human. He understood the cracks beneath the surface, and he helped others see them too. And when Melissa reached out one last time with a simple "thank you," it felt like the final piece had clicked into place. They had both moved on, not as enemies, but as people who had grown. If this story touched you, hit that subscribe button. We've got more powerful real-life journeys coming your way. And drop a comment. What does forgiveness mean to you?